Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the Moderating Your Online Spaces live show, kind of a workshop. We'll see how this goes. It's part of BookNet Fest 2020. So we got started this past week with content online for 2020, and we're doing panels, workshops, Twitter chats, Instagram challenges, all kinds of stuff that you can find more information about on our website, booknetfest.com, and also by following us on Twitter at BookNetFest. So today I am joined by my very best friend and constant content partner, Nicole, but she will introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I always feel like being your best friend. I'm like, okay, well, that's what I'm doing here is your best friend. So that's why I'm here. I co-founded SnarkSquad.com with you. And currently I am a producer of educational YouTube videos for a company called Complexly, and I work on Crash Course. And yeah, that's who I am.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole produces YouTube videos thing is also why you're here.
Yes. Yes.
Not just because you are my best friend. But mostly that. We'll get to the YouTube portion of this for sure, especially your experience with YouTube now versus when you were creating just blogging and things like that, and my experience on my BookTube channel. But I figured it would be cool to start with just a little bit about our journey, I don't know, online moderating spaces. Mm-hmm. And I think for probably both of us, that may have started with our blogging days, but I don't know, did your forum days have anything to do with this? Or was it really truly starting to personal blog that kind of brought you into this conversation or thinking about moderating?
I had totally thought about this in terms of personal blogging, and it wasn't until you said that I just had this moment of oh yeah, yeah, sure, yes, yeah, running music forums and stuff and having moderators. I don't even remember what I had them do. What did they do? What was their job? I was the admin of the forum and I had moderators. I don't really know what that consisted of. I didn't really think about that in the context of this conversation. So probably it goes back that far. But when I think about this in terms of personal blogging, which is how we met. And I think is important because that space, this was always personal for me. And I think that has informed a lot of how I think about it, now where I am moderating comment spaces professionally, that I think I brought the idea that this is personal for people into that conversation in a way that I don't know that my colleagues were necessarily thinking about it in quite those same terms, whereas I always was, because we create educational content. So there's I think a different air of free speech and objectivity and all of that. That's just very, very different. And because I started really thinking about this, about how I am controlling and thinking about my online spaces in the context of a personal blog that I started 10 years ago, it's personal. It's fundamentally personal. And so my first two experiences with banning people from a comment section, ultimately what it boiled down to was, this is bad for my mental health. An interaction is happening right now in the comment section of a website that I have paid for. I pay for this. I pay to do this. And they're here leaving comments that are sucking up all the energy in my life. And it is making me feel shitty about myself. It's making it harder for me to go about my day. And it's personal. It's not just, I don't know. I have a lot of feelings about it, but history-wise, right? So there's the personal blog. We started doing Snark Squad, and that has been an ongoing project. And there's the blog itself. There's recapping, and recapping super popular stuff. those two experiences. One was on my personal blog, the other was on Snark Squad. Buffy recaps got real heated. Yeah, people had a lot of opinion. We had a lot of feelings. People had feelings about our feelings. It was very intense, wild drama to be living through in my 20s in, whatever, what was this, like circa 2013, 2014, something like that. And then eventually YouTube, and now YouTube is kind of the main space that I think about moderating comments.
Yeah. So we started Snark Squad, and I mean, I talk about it all the time on my channel, but it's like basically a media criticism website. We do recaps. So we'll recap episodes of television, or when it comes to books, we'll do recaps like chapter by chapter. And it started off, we were recapping books that we read as children. So Babysitter's Club and Sweet Valley High and things. And like, it was, not only was the website like very small, but also like nobody really cared, I guess, that we were like, this is silly or dumb or whatever. But then we went from there to recapping like more popular things and more pop culture-y things. Mm-hmm. So, 50 Shades of Grey, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, like things that people had more feelings about. And Buffy was definitely the one that we started getting, like our links started getting shared out onto spaces that were for Buffy fans. Mm-hmm. And so we were being very critical of Buffy, and also in a snarky manner, like that's the whole thing. And so we started getting
some... The name, guys.
So that we started getting some backlash in the comments. And, I had experience of like moderating my personal blog comments, but not in a way that I think prepared me for what we came up against when we were doing Snark Squad. And in particular, like there was a contingent, to say it in so many words, like we did not like Spike on our blog and like his character arc and all this. And we were very vocal about how we didn't like how that was going. And like the pro Spike, Defense League showed up in our comments. So we put up with that for a very long time. And it wasn't, okay, to be clear, it wasn't differing opinions. It wasn't that like we didn't like Spike and they did, but it was the like tenor of the comments and what started happening specifically around the time. This is like a mild spoiler for Buffy, but Buffy gets raped during the course of the show. And so during the time that we were discussing that plot point, the content of the comments that were being left were such that, like Nicole said, like it was bad for our mental health, like the things that we were reading. And it was becoming,
the language was abusive, and it was like super personal. And I will also say, like, I look back at this now, and I think like this was an unhealthy situation for those people too, like the people that were leaving us those comments. We were just talking about this yesterday, about the way in which the specific person that we wound up actually banning was not the only one who was participating in this, but it was like the most egregious. And I think about how distressing my whole dynamic was with this woman, and how, like, as you put it yesterday, like she was living rent free in our heads for just well beyond the scope of the time that we were working on it. But also we were clearly living rent free in her head too. Like all of this was bad. Like why all of us, like something needed to happen to like not have this keep happening.
And it was like we said, it was just part of what we do in Snark Squad, and part of like the media criticism, is like taking the stuff that is fictional, but then like drawing real world like counterparts and talking about why it's important. And so we were talking about like rape culture and things that had, significance to everybody, but also like really personal significance to us. And so the language that was being used and like sort of the conversations that were popping up on that space, like Nicole said, that we were paying for, like we're hosting, we're investing all of these hours into, like it became like not fun. Like email notifications that we had a comment were awful. And I remember like building up to the episode in which Buffy gets raped and like being like very upset, and like, I don't know, we were just like, this is going to be awful. Okay, post. Like it wasn't a happy thing, to post. It was just a really weird situation. And yeah, so we did eventually get to the point. I remember getting a text message or an email from Nicole being like, can we just ban her? Like, can we ban her?
Because I was sitting at, so I had like months prior, I had like set up my notifications so that I wasn't getting the actual direct, like I had a separate, like a filter, so like skip the inbox. But I was out to dinner with my family, and I was sitting at dinner, like refreshing my inbox because we had just posted something right before I left. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is not, I'm like, and I wasn't like refreshing, like, ooh, exciting thing. Like, I was anxiously refreshing so that when I got home from dinner, I could be prepared to go respond to this comment. Like, that's not healthy. That's not, like, this is not a good dynamic. Something about that was not, yeah. That was my moment of like, no.
And I think at that point, like, I was like, yeah, well, yeah, sure, let's do it. But also it wasn't an easy decision. I mean, at that point it became one because we were so obviously in a bad place with what was happening in our own comment section. But part of what, like, the mentality that I came up with, like, from my personal blogging days. And I remember, like, part of the early discourse, because Nicole and I met on, like, a forum it was called 20-something bloggers. So people who were 20-something who were doing this personal blogging thing, which you may not be old enough to remember, was really hip and cool at one point. So one of, like, the major, like, discourse things that I remember from that time was that there were some people who were turning off their comments and just, like, posting their posts, but they didn't want any interaction in the comments. And so it became this whole thing of, like, can you do that? If you're posting online, don't you have to kind of accept, like, the feedback that comes with it? And so I think that conversation really made me think that, yes, you have to sort of accept, if you're going to post online, like, you have to accept it. Like, if not, go write in your journal is, like, basically, like, the mentality. Like, I'm posting.
Why are you sharing this with the public if not for that purpose?
Right. So that was kind of the mentality that I had. But then we got to this place at Snark Squad where I was like, oh no, like, we have, up to what point do I have to accept this? And
also, like, the way that the other thing I remember being really, that felt really distressing about that is that it was clear that we had a really cool community in the comments on those posts, and we felt like we were creating this very inclusive space. And so the idea of telling people that, like, it felt like saying certain opinions aren't welcome here, and like, which now yes. But at the time I had a lot of I had a lot of feelings about that idea, like the idea that certain opinions aren't welcome here. But two, it actually wasn't about that. Like, that was the thing that we had to sort of unpack, like, for ourselves at that moment, that I wasn't even yet ready to get to the place where I could say, I don't really care, certain opinions aren't welcome here. But it was just recognizing that, like, there's a difference between saying, even if you want to say all opinions are welcome in this space, we were still saying that all opinions are welcome in this space, but also there is, like, a level of basic respect and human decency that you should be bringing to those opinions in the way that you are sharing and expressing those opinions. And there are just a lot of really personal attacks, like, just really, really personal stuff about, like, history with sexual assault and stuff that was, like, not, like, this is out of bounds.
Right. And then, so I think we both came to this idea, and I remember you writing a blog post about this now, actually, if, like, I remember correctly, but this idea that, like, you can have that opinion, but you can go have it elsewhere. Like, I don't need to provide you a platform to have this opinion. And so it's like you're walking into my living room, or you're grabbing my microphone to have your garbage opinion. Like, I don't have to do that. I don't have to give you my platform. I don't have to lend you my microphone. Like, you can go have that opinion somewhere else, basically, which is kind of like the conclusion that we got to after much stress. And we always joke, because there was one point where we met up in California. We see each other in California once a year, except for in 2020, which is the garbage year.
Stop.
But we see each other every year in California, and we were walking around, like, by the beach, Santa Monica Pier, like, talking about how this person must think that we spend all of our time offline, like, thinking about this, and we totally didn't. And we spent hours talking about how we didn't dedicate hours to thinking about this. And it was like, I don't know that we processed at that point how under our skin it had gotten, but obviously it had. So So I guess that kind of brings us from like Snark Squad to our experience on YouTube moderating comments here. So I know yours is a little bit different because, like you said, it is professional and it is like a much larger platform.
Yes. I'm echoing. I'm getting a feedback of myself from, I think, you. Sorry, what, where were we going with this? Larger platform?
Yes. Are you still hearing echo?
No.
Okay. No, it's just saying that from like a Snark Squad, I guess our other like part of our experience is now like moderating comments on YouTube, which is different for you because like you said, it's like professional and this platform that you're doing on it is much larger.
Yeah, yes. And I think, so I think there's like a handful of different considerations with that. Like, I think that, uh, so backing up to like the piece of this that's personal, right? So my other like first experience, early experience with like banning somebody from a comment section was like on my personal blog, somebody saying just like really inappropriate stuff about like a family member that I was like, this is not like acceptable, and I don't have to like put up with you doing this again. I'm not like paying to provide you this platform to voice and express this, right? And this is very clearly about me. It's about whatever. And so like that line feels super obvious, right? I think, and like, so coming to a space where we're talking about physics, like it feels like that feels really different, right? It feels like what are people going to say in the comments of a video about physics that's like personal? And well, have you heard of being a woman on the internet? So there's I think like there's when you're in, I don't feel this way as much now, but I felt, I've been doing this for almost 6 years now. I felt when I first started a greater sense of, well, we're, the free flow of ideas, like, right, like that's what we're doing if we're doing educational content. And again, this idea to the point that I was making earlier about like all opinions are welcome here, right? It's like we're trying to foster ideas, and if you close off a comment section or you start blocking people or whatever else, then you are like limiting the flow of ideas. And I think my first like point of pushback on that was about like people, right? So like acknowledging, again, physics being the example, that being the first, I think that was the first thing that we had that was hosted by not a white man. And so like going into it and saying, this is going to be, like this is a thing that has not been an issue that is going to be an issue. Like I'm telling you right now, this is going to be a thing that we are going to have to think about. People are going to be commenting on her as a person. We are going to be getting tons of comments that have the fuck all to do with physics, that are going to be about the human being that is like delivering this. And so on our end of things, like how do you think about this person? So like consideration number one there being, what making the comment space a not terrible place for this host to be. I mean, we tell them not to look at the comments at all anyway. First of all, that's like we don't want you to look at the comments anyway. However, that being said, assuming that they might, like I want to make sure, like part of my job as a producer is like to take care of our hosts, right? Like that's my job, is to take care of this person in some capacity. And so moderating the comments to me is part of that, like making sure that the comments are not an abusive place for this person. So like there's that piece of it. And then I think the other piece of it is the kind of community that you are fostering in your comment section. I have like complicated feelings about Crash Course comments. Crash Course is so big that there's a part of me that feels I have a hard time thinking about like what community we're even fostering in that space. And that's like a separate, I don't know, philosophical, like separate from this. However, for the purpose of like broad strokes, like how you think about this, I think that you're also saying something to other people in those comment section in terms of the kinds of things that are there and that you're leaving there. And like if the first wave of comments are all about, the first few comments that you are getting are signals for everybody that comes after, in terms of what kinds of discussion is going to happen in this space. And obviously you can do things in the context of the video itself that will affect that, but also I think like there are separate like community side decisions, and like, and there are things about the ways in which you are moderating that will also change and affect the tone of the conversation that's happening in the comment section. And like that in turn is like signaling something to the audience. Like the audience is signaling to the future audience as well down the line. We see this in like more controversial topics that we post, that like the top comments are all comments about the comments. Like that's, you know, it turns into this whole cycle of that. And I don't know, this is getting away from me, but I think there's the two pieces of it, right? So there's the human being who is saying the words is like one big consideration, and then like the community that is being formed in that space is the other big consideration.
Yeah, so I think that it's weird to me because when I started blogging, I started doing it anonymously. And so when I started Snark Squad, I was also doing it sort of like anonymously and under a pen name. So if you go back to like really old Snark Squad posts, which I don't encourage you to do, but if you were to do that, you would still see like the pen name that I used to like write these things. And so it was like a whole process of me like, okay, well now I'm going to use my real name online. And then I was like, well, okay, now I'm going to make videos. So it was like getting less and less anonymous. And I don't think that I was like prepared, even on like my super small scale, you know, in the context of like YouTube, and even in the context of BookTube, I'm considered like mid-range or whatnot. But I don't think that I was prepared to like be like a woman online very visibly, and then also like a Black woman online very visibly, and then the sorts of comments that not super frequently, but frequently enough, like more than zero is too many. And I've received more than zero of these comments of people just being like blatantly racist or sexist or whatnot, in the comments of my video where I'm talking about like this middle grade fantasy series, I love it. And someone's like, you know, like I don't think that even existing online, because I did exist online for so long a period anonymously, like I wasn't ready for it. So we've gotten a few like comments and stuff already, but this one, when do I mute block? So it made me think about like, I think on one of those videos, which I have a video that is called Why is BookTube So White, that is currently unlisted. So I go through these like phases of like, I will put it up so people can find it, and then I will start receiving like the comments I don't want to receive, so I just unlist it and like I can't deal with it. And I think it was during one of those that I was sharing like a comment with Nicole, and I was like, can you believe this? And she's like, oh yeah, do you have like words muted? Don't you have like a block list or like things like that? And I was like, huh? And so like not only from like, I don't know, like a perspective of not using the tools, but this question of when do I mute block, I think it's very like, it's been key for me to think about how I would say, or what would I say to a friend? Like if a friend came to me with this comment and was like, hey, look at this comment that I got, what would I say to that person? I would be like, delete that, mute that person, block them, or whatever it is. And then why can't I apply those things to my own space and my own self? So that was like a key point, I think, for me in like my YouTube journey of like understanding how I wanted to moderate my comment space, because I was receiving a lot more like negativity and like just bad stuff, and I was taking it more than I would like ever say to a friend of mine that they should accept. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, the things that you would allow a friend. I also will reiterate for everybody that you should all be making use of the like automated filters to block words on YouTube, because, you know, like bare minimum, there's just a lot of words that are like, anybody who's going to be using this word in a comment, like probably they suck and you don't want them leaving comments on your channel, and that's it. Sorry about that. So that's, yes. Would you allow this for a friend? And I think like that was also really helpful for me too, coming to it from like doing it in a professional capacity was really nice, because I got to like actually have that separation of like, I do not want this human being to ever see this comment about them. Like that's like that. Like I personally look at this and be like, this, you know, the host of this thing should never see this comment. Period. Like that's this is not for their eyes. And usually if I think that, I also think that probably there's a viewer who I also don't want to ever see this comment, right? Like that's like, this is, you know,
the two angles,
like the two, yes. Piece of it and the host piece of it.
Right. So I will also just highlight this here too, because Mara says, I once had a manager told me if there's an issue and I think they don't pay me enough to deal with this, to call him. On YouTube, I have no manager. So I start to think that time to ban them. So it's like the same sort of deal. Like if this were a thing that you'd call somebody else, like tap somebody else in, like above your pay grade in a different situation, well, you're the manager. So at that point, it's time to say, okay, this like has got to go. This person needs to be booted. This comment needs to be deleted, or I need to add something to my mute list or whatnot in order to continue to moderate your space the way that you would like to.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I would also say too, in the context of like the video that you're talking about, like that is the kind of thing that my approach to that would be to either, I understand why you went the route of unlisting. My approach would personally be either to disable the comments entirely, or to set the comments to hold all for review. So like the existing comment section stays there. And this is actually something that we have started doing. We started doing this earlier this summer. Because European history video was just like almost immediately being flooded with really not a good productive space. And building off of the community thing that I was saying earlier, we also have the consideration of educators assign these videos to their students. And so sometimes the comment section, like we have heard from teachers that a reason that they are like that is a concern that they sometimes have in assigning crash course videos to probably not so much for college professors, but like, you know, K-12 teachers, that like, I don't know what the comment section is going to look like. And I feel slightly uncomfortable sending my students to that. And so one of the things that we have started doing is after a certain point, we just set because there's no way to turn off comments without deleting the ones that currently exist. So basically at a certain point, we just say, we're not going to moderate this space anymore. And once we are not going to moderate the space anymore, we just set it to hold all for review, so that like it's there. And in theory, we could go and like approve them.
And review them.
But I don't know. So I'm putting that out there as an option.
Okay. Now, but that we're here, so let's talk a little bit about like these tips and tricks or whatnot. And there's stuff coming up in the comments too, so I'm definitely going to go back and get through all of this. But since we're here, share with us any other tips or tricks that you've got.
So yeah, being like aware of the fact that there are several settings. You have multiple options, right? So specific to YouTube. That's where like my key tips and tricks are. But I think there are ways you could adapt this to your blog or whatever, wherever you're hosting and moderating stuff. I also think that there are ways you can adapt this to like your Twitter privacy settings and whatnot too. But speaking specifically about YouTube, I think there are several different settings options in terms of the level of like comments, how available. Like you can let all comments through, you can hold potentially inappropriate, you can like hold everything for review, you can disable comments, like all of those things are options. You can change the setting too, right? So if you have a video where it just seems like the space is bad, then pick a different setting, change that, do something else about that. I think again, the banned words list, I actually don't. My go-to for this used to be the Internet Creators Guild list, but the ICG doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if Miriam is still in the chat. She might be able to like, I know that was always my go-to for the longest time, was the ICG banned words list. And I just realized, I was like, well, if there's no more ICG, I don't know if I can keep telling people that. But also, I don't know, common sense, you can produce a list. On Crash Course, we have a list of like, it's like 300 words. It grows as things happen. Sometimes we have like unrelated just events happen, and that forces us to add things to the banned words list. So that is like a very super important tool. The other thing is that you can add comment moderators. You can ask other people. And this is also something that I'm like a super big proponent of, to go back to what you were saying before about like, would you let a friend see this? You know, like, would you want your friend to see this? And I think that like that is a good way of thinking about it, of just, I don't know, like Miriam has a list. Yeah. And you know who is actually super useful in this moment, because my go-to list to share. Anyway, have a friend, set them as your comment moderator. The one limitation of appointing comment moderators that is annoying to me is that they do not have access to the held for review. They can only moderate what is published. And this feels like a design flaw to me on YouTube's part. Can you imagine YouTube with a design flaw? But but having somebody to like poke through that space. I think it's a little bit harder for BookTube because of like the weird like flows of stuff. Like I know a lot of your content that is getting viewed now is like a review that you put up several years ago. And so like that's a little bit harder to have somebody else moderating because they don't have access. Like they don't get, like that looking at all your comments sort of panel, but like go to a video and see a comment. So it's more useful for when a video goes up, or for a situation like a live like this, to have somebody, moderating the chat space.
I would also say, like, for instance, I have a review of Ready Player One that I made years ago, but right before the movie came out and during the movie came out, that video just kind of skyrocketed in terms of like new engagement, and most of it was like bros mad at me because I didn't like this book. So like around things like that where you're like, okay, this is about to, there's an adaptation, there's a movie coming out, there's a part 2, that's like a good thing to flag and be like, I might need some extra moderation on this video or whatnot. Yeah.
Yes. And like that's an easy thing to like have an exchange system of sorts with too, of just this is it is easier, can confirm it is easier to do this when it is somebody else having like professional experience with this. It's when you can have that layer of distance. I think that the guilt point that somebody raised in the comments earlier, like that is a huge thing. There is a level of, I don't know, like, am I being too sensitive? And like, no, you're not. Like, are you uncomfortable? You're not being too sensitive. Like, if you are uncomfortable, then make it go away. That's it. One of my banned words is, or one of my, it's not banned, it's like it forces it into held for review. It doesn't, like, the comment still gets left, but it's in the held for review section, just so that you know if you have never utilized this. But one of my words is teeth, because I'm like, I fucking know that this is like, I don't need you to leave this comment. This isn't like new information to me, but probably if you're leaving this comment, you're like, nobody's ever coming to me to leave that comment because they want to be nice to me. Right. That's not where you're going with this. So
you're not making content about teeth. So this has nothing to do with what's happening on this video. I was going to save this like for the end, but to this point, like something that this actually came up last year after some content at BookNet Fest, we were talking about like things that we could put together as resources or whatnot. And so that's how this idea for this, what would have been a workshop at BookNet Fest, came up. But also in the description of this video, we've got like a Google form now open where you can leave your information. Basically what we want to do is start like a network or an exchange so that you can either ask for help moderating your comments, or if you want to volunteer some help to moderate somebody else's comments, collecting your information so that we can connect people and there can be that exchange of like, I moderate yours, you moderate mine, and we can kind of set up a system here to help people set up boundaries, and so that there is that second layer of like, this might be easier for somebody else to do than for me to do, but also for protection, so you don't have to see your own garbage that comes in about you. You can go help somebody else take out their garbage. Wow. Yeah. So that form is in the description. It's very simple. It's just collecting names and emails, and basically whether you would want to get your comments moderated or to help somebody else moderate their comments, and then we'll reach out after the fact to set up this network. So that is a resource that BookNet Fest will now start to kind of put together.
I also, that reminds me too, that one of the other big things that, before we like move into comments and whatever else, but the other like really important thing I think to think about is how you are setting boundaries for yourself, how you are choosing to engage with this space. Again, to kind of go back to like the professional example, I was for 1 year a host for a crash course, and so it was part of my job to be moderating those comments. And I don't know. I have some feelings about whether or not it should have been, but it was. And so I was doing that. And so like that, and that was like really, really bad. Like the experience was just all around like traumatic. And because the comments got really nasty. It was sociology was the series. And so, we had several videos on race and several videos on gender and sexuality and whatever. So like precisely the sort of things that like shitty people are searching YouTube. I like also my very small YouTube channel. One of my most commented on videos is a video on the wage gap, because there are people who are just like going to YouTube to like yell at people for acknowledging the existence of the wage gap, right? Like that just is how it is, right? And so in addition to like the ways that it was sort of baseline hard to suddenly be in this position where I was like, it was part of my job to moderate a comment section in which people were being like really terrible to me. There were also pieces of it, ways in which I was exacerbating this situation. It was maybe a year, 2 years ago that I first learned the term digital self-harm. And it was like a light bulb moment for me, of realizing that like that is the thing, that is what I was doing. That like it got to a point where I would find myself going to the most recent video and like refreshing the held for review and like seeking out these things that would hurt me, and like knowing full well like that, like that's what else, we had all these systems, right, to prevent it. And so I think like you're going to have to set your own boundaries in your own way. But for me, I don't look at it. The held for review, I just, that doesn't exist to me. Like that's, if we have a false positive, sorry, like I'm sorry to that person who left a perfectly fine comment, but like happened to swear or whatever, and Crash Course, we have every conceivable swear word is in our banned words list. And like, fine, you can be leaving a perfectly nice comment but swear, and like I have a foul mouth, but like I don't care. Like it's not worth it to me to go rescue that false positive, because I know for me personally, that space is not healthy. Like it's not a good place for me to be. So I think, yeah, I wanted to like put that out there to like, if that turns anybody else's, gets gears turning for you too, wanted to share that.
For sure. And I think that, for a lot of us who have like smaller spaces, either book blogs or, Twitters or booktube spaces, these things can be infrequent, or, as you grow, you start seeing them more frequently. So, like, why is something like this important to start thinking about when you have 1,000 subscribers or 2,000 subscribers? And I think that it's because it gets easier and easier to set boundaries. And if you set them early and you get these systems in place and you start thinking about these ideas of what your own boundaries are and what is digital self-harm and all of these things, by the time you don't have to think about that once you've grown, once you have 5 or 10,000, those right. systems are already in place and you're protecting yourself good and early. So it's like a question of, there are a lot of questions I think that people don't start to think about when they join BookTube, because it's just like, oh, books, and people are talking about books, fun. Nobody's going to watch me. But then like these things start to come up. So I think it's like part of the important question and advice that I would give to anyone starting out is to think about what you want your common space to be, and to start to set those boundaries good and early. And I think about like in the context of like digital self-harm, like, authors looking up their own 1-star reviews, or booktubers going to gossip forums that are dedicated to talking about booktubers and probably not the best light, or things like that, I am like, I was gonna say my old house from that, series we don't talk about anymore. I'm a 5-wing 4. I'm like anything on like the personality things that are like about knowledge, like that's me. So I'm the like curiosity one that's like, what are people saying? But you can't necessarily always indulge. You can't go dumpster diving into these places. You have to learn, even if slowly, even if on smaller scales, to set those boundaries and take care of yourself, or else you're not going to last in whatever space you're in. It's going to hit a space where it's going to be too much for you, and yeah, that's definitely what you don't want.
Yes.
Let's see if we covered everything. I think we did. So I'm going to head back up into comments. Unless there's anything else, Nicole.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so going from the very top, when we were talking about Snark Squad, Josh says, so with something like that, we were talking about like recaps and stuff. Did you ever drop a recap or anything because you felt it wouldn't be worth the hassle you'd get in the comments?
No, we just kept going.
We
had an order. We had a numbered list to go through.
Just kept going.
This idea would never have occurred to us.
And I don't even think like I don't now also, because of this idea of like how we've set up our boundaries, and I don't know, the community that is now attracted to Snark Squad, I don't have these fears anymore of like, I'm going to post recaps on Midnight Sun, and I know that the majority of people are just going to be snarking with us in the comments or whatnot. But that's part of what setting boundaries does, I guess, is that you, like I said, form the community that you want in these spaces. So now I don't freak out. I know there's always a like possibility. At one time when we were on 50 Shades, somebody shared our link in like a pro 50 Shades forum, and so there was like a little wave of people being like, actually, this is the best. And it is whatever or whatnot. But for the most part, we did not make good decisions then immediately. But now we're in a place where I don't really have like that fear of like posting things where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's also, just I in general would feel so much, I would not feel any of the anxiety around it. Like if somebody was leaving far less, I would be like, no.
It does get so much easier because I think also like after you do it, you're like, it's like a sigh of relief of like, oh, okay, this is good. This is the good stuff. Like I'm happier here, and so yeah. Once you start
my favorite thing is the people who will leave comments that are like trying to antagonize you about it. Be like, I bet you won't leave this up. You're right, I won't leave this up. That's true. Bye. You're
not going to respond, so you're right. So why'd you waste your time? So Dallas had a comment, but also like part of her comment is, how much power do you give a reader or viewer is kind of like a great question to ask yourself as you're thinking about what your own boundaries are. And I think that question of like, like I said, giving somebody your platform versus their own go make your own video to say whatever you want. Don't come into my video to use my audience and my comment space to say whatever you want to do. Go somewhere else with that. I think it's kind of like my viewpoint.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think like there's like a whole spectrum on which it exists. And like, this is a question that you have to answer for yourself about what kind of like dialogue you are trying to enter into. Like I know you mentioned earlier here, and we have talked about at great length, like the ways in which you are thinking about, like, if this is public, then it is for discussion. Like if I am making it public, again, if I didn't want people to react to it, then go write it in a diary, whatever. But like, obviously there is so much media out there that doesn't come with a built-in directly below the media people are responding to it. If you watch a movie, you read a book, like there's no like comment card at the back of the book that you mail into the author, right? Like there's like it is up to you to decide how you want to establish that. And I think, to me, my like guiding philosophy first and foremost is just that you should be aware of that. Like you should be aware that you are in control, that you get to decide. That like it is up to you to establish what kind of dialogue you want to have. And like I mean, obviously we're coming at this I think very much on the side of what are the kinds of things that you would like block and ban people for, and like people being abusive and people saying like racist shit and whatever, like there's that category of things. There's also like more constructive stuff, and like the flip side of all of this, I think part of why people get so defensive about blocking and banning is like you're not listening to critique. And like again, I would say that it is still a question of it is up to you to decide. You actually don't have to listen to critique either. Like I don't like constructive critique. Like that is also a choice that you have. And I don't know. Like I think that to me is like thing one, is that like you can and should be intentional about how you are engaging with and utilizing comment spaces.
Right. And I think there is, even for me, that I'm very much like a person who says, if you're posting something publicly, like you need to consider that. You need to consider an audience. But I think there's a difference in between, like right now, today, in fact, Twitter was talking about like consumerism on BookTube. And there's a difference between the community having a conversation and me going to somebody's specific video and in their comments being like, you spend too much money, bitch. Like that is like two very different things.
So you're notorious for that.
I just feel like I do believe that like the things that we post publicly do lend themselves to conversation and critique, and you have to expect that there is like some of this interaction that you're going to get when you're posting publicly. But that is almost a separate issue to me now. I didn't always think this way, but like this is like kind of what I've been slowly finding my way towards, is like a separate issue from me under my face on a video, what I'm allowing to happen. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have to think about those two different sort of like things. And again, it very much is, to echo your point, like what kind of community you're building. Like I enjoy videos where I can talk to the creator. Like if it's somebody who only posts and never has comments open, that's probably not going to be for me, but that is the kind of content that they can make. And that is a choice that you can make. So you kind of have to find where your own lines are. And then underneath all that, moderate your space so that it looks like what you want it to look like.
Yeah.
To that end, Reading in Rum says, I struggle with finding the line between listening to other vastly differing opinions and muting, blocking someone who is being offensive or negatively affecting me.
Yeah. I mean, I think like, and that's sort of where I was going with this, but like, I think that you are right that like they are two different categories of thing, right? Like there's are they like discussing the idea here, or are they, commenting on my appearance or like whatever? Like I think but that feels more cut and dry. I will also say that I still like, I think that sometimes it can get muddier, right? Like people can be leaving a comment that is meant to be about like the ideas, but like being mean about it, like just being really, really mean and nasty, while saying things that are not like the substance is not, the substance is a disagreement. But like, I don't know. I don't feel an obligation to engage with somebody who's being mean and nasty to me. Like, like depending on what it is. Again, like it depends on why they're being mean and nasty to me. But if they're being mean and nasty to me because I don't like Ready Player One, I've never read it, but like if that's whatever, like if that's the reason, then like I don't know.
I think too, like again, this is almost like a muscle that you work out, but kind of if you see something and you're like, that makes me uncomfortable, like Nicole said earlier, like why? Thinking about why. Because a lot of times for me, people are disagreeing with me and they're not saying anything overtly against me. But if you start really looking at the comment, it's like, I did one about why I hate read or whatnot. And someone was like, I really just feel sorry for you. And I feel sorry about the time that you waste. And so the comment was disagreeing with my take, but also the tone of it was also like, it's disparaging. Like it was being mean to me. And I responded back to this person. I was like, I talk about my reasons why in the video, because they were like, I couldn't watch past minute one. So I was like, okay, my reasons are there. And they were like, I'm really just checking in with you because are you okay? And at that point, like, you're being mean. You're not, So in a case like that, you could be like, well, is it wrong because they're just disagreeing with me? No, they're being mean to you.
Also, like, what are their priorities? Yeah, this is like a lot going on there.
Anytime you feel like a red flag about a comment, like, listen to yourself. And at the end of the day, if you err on the side of making yourself feel too good in your comments, I think that that's okay. Like, versus like leaving the things you're on the line for, like, err on the side of like being extra careful.
Yes.
All right.
Especially because it's like, again, the like viewers will also see this. And so in addition to taking care of, to like take my sort of like two things but applying it to yourself, right? So there's like the you piece of it, there's the taking care of you piece of it, but there's also the other people. And something that I think gets lost in the am I being too sensitive about this is like the ways in which like other people might see this, and like the I'm trying to think of how to get at what I'm saying, but like I think that while you are feeling sensitive about a thing, that other people might also feel sensitive about. And so like maybe like remove yourself from that equation and like, do I feel that this is an acceptable way to speak to a person if that person's not me? Do I feel that this is an acceptable way to speak to my best friend? If the answer is no, then
I comment. So a couple of people had this advice too. Make sure you mute your own personally identifiable information if someone is to keep someone from doxing you in your own comments. So for instance, putting your address on your blocked words list. So if somebody were ever to post it in a comment, that would be immediately either held for review or not published or whatnot. We mentioned before that Miriam does in fact have a list. So I will try and grab that list from Miriam and share it on the Discord so that everybody can have access to that. Let's see. Just a point that Miriam also had, that moderators removing comments puts them into the held for review. So if you go dumpster diving later, you will see them. So that's like another thing about like learning how to stay out of places maybe that would be harmful to you.
Or like being, cautious about how you're making the space and time for it. Like I understand, it's different. There are different sizes of like platforms, right? So the size of that space is going to be really, really different. Again, so even professionally speaking, I have hosted on like a large channel and a very, very small one. And it's a lot harder to like not click over it on the very, very small one. Just because it's like, I don't know, there's 7 things there. Why don't I just go look at the 7 things versus there's 100,000 things there. Literally, I checked the other day. Crash Course has 104,000 comments held for review right now. So like it's much easier to be like, oh, I don't need to comb through 104,000 things than to say I'm not going to comb through the seven things. You're going to do it. I feel like there are still ways that you can be careful with yourself and like picking times that are good, like times of day or whatever, like when, carving out, this is the specific space that I'm going to allow myself, like set a timer. You got 10 minutes. You can read whatever, read, delete, review them, do what you're going to do. I don't know. It is maybe more complicated than just saying don't do it, I guess. Where I'm going with that.
Be careful is more. Yeah. I just wanted to highlight this comment about I modded a somewhat big booktuber's live stream on Black Lives Matter, and yeah, it was rough. People were harassing me for getting rid of comments of harmless stuff. We talked about it later, and they got more mods, luckily. So just to, part of what we want to do in setting up this network, I think Nicole made a point while we were talking about it, that it is probably easier to do this with friends or somebody, that you have a close relationship with. And also in setting up this network, I think that what we want to do is also set up these conversations so that everybody understands, like if you're helping me moderate my comments, you understand what I want my comment section to look like. So there is support for somebody who is moderating to be like, yeah, no, get rid of that. This is what I want, sort of thing. So that's definitely something we'll be taking into consideration. Mara again says, I recently decided that I'm not looking at comments for older videos, only videos from the last couple of weeks. The harmful stuff was largely on the older stuff, and it was doing my head in to read. So Nicole talked about how they disable comments now on Crash Course videos after 72 hours.
That's the number that we said. This whenever you go back in and
turn it off. So that might be a thing, and we're seeing that like the same trend that if after a certain point the comments are trash anyways, like they're not adding anything to the conversation. So is it a matter of just not looking at them? And if you can do it that way and be careful with yourself, but also if you need like a stricter guideline, maybe just send them all to be held for review after a certain point or whatnot.
Turn off those emails. We talked about at the beginning the fact that we were getting the email notifications about the Snark Squad comments, but like didn't we just glossed right over that? It didn't really sit with how that was bad. Like just in general, like why were we doing that? I don't know.
So Miriam, when I said that somebody else could go somewhere else and talk about whatever, they go somewhere else, but don't chop up my video in between your commentary. Yeah, please.
Get out of it.
I really struggle with wasting time on people who are dicks in my comment section when I should probably just block. I do this too. There are some days that I'm like, you caught me on the right day, and I'm like, I'm going to reply. 9 times out of 10, and I try to remind myself of this, it's a waste of time, and I got nothing out of the interaction. I didn't change anybody's mind. Yeah.
Nobody left that interaction better for it. Like
no, right. So I try to keep that in mind when I'm feeling like extra spicy. I'm better about it. And like I said, I've been getting better with more time. But yeah, again, if a friend came to you and was like, should I reply? Would you tell them yes or no? And the people who comment without watching the whole video.
I really wish that YouTube had SoundCloud style timestamps on when you're leaving the comments.
Anything in like those first few seconds?
Yeah. No, I'm not interested in your comment at 02.
You shouldn't. I don't moderate first thing in the morning or last thing at night. Quick way to ruin a day. That's a really good point. I hadn't really thought about that. I kind of just look at comments sometimes as they come in, but setting some time aside or like and being very intentional with when you're doing this, especially if you're helping somebody else out, I think is really important as well. I think that's the end of the comments.
Yeah. That was with Crash Course Sociology. That was the thing. So the videos would go live at 3 p.m. on Mondays, and then I would spend the last 2 hours of my workday just like sitting in the comments. And again, some of it was, like for my job, like responding to all the nice comments and whatever. But at a certain point, I would also just be like dumpster diving again. And then like I go home for the day. Like that was the last thing I did. That's what I get to go like sit and think about for the rest of the day. Bad.
I think that's it. Is there anything else that we didn't cover? Questions from the audience? I think we're good unless anybody else has anything else in the comments. We made it to a whole hour. We're both having like after work brain, so we were a little
pride. This is always when we podcast. That's always our thing. Is when we record podcasts after the work day. It's bad. It's not the time. My brain's done. My brain's like, cool. It's time to watch TV and stare at the ceiling, maybe.
All right, so like I said, all the form for the Comment Moderation Network is in the description. You can come find us on Discord as well to either continue this conversation or get some of the other resources that we talked about. Also, tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, so same time, we're having our first Twitter chat of BookNet Fest. So we're going to be talking about the politics of reading, which was our first panel. Nicole was also on that one as well. So we'll be asking questions around that topic. You can ask the panelists questions, and all of that information is over on our Twitter at BookNet Fest. I am, of course, my name is Marines.
I'm at Sweeney Says. That's like you. That's like you. I have a line.
Thank you guys for joining us, and thank you for your great commentary and questions, and we will see you around.